I hear people all the time, like, how do you get a Pilates body? And I'm like, oh, it's really easy. You have a body, you do Pilates, and then you have a Pilates body.
Yeah.
End of story, right? Like everybody wants like some sort of shape or something, and to let them know that every body is a good body and they all come in different shapes and sizes, and
Yeah.
you just have to figure out how to use it the best that you can. And we have a lot of overweight clients or larger clients, and they can't roll up. And they'll say, well, I was never able to roll up, right? Because I was too fat. And I'm like, no, that has nothing to do with it. I go, if you consistently do Pilates and listen to what I say, you'll roll up in 6 months. And almost every single one of my clients are like, no, I won't. No, I won't. And I usually get them to roll up within 3 months.
Welcome to Grind It Out Video Podcast. I'm your host, Katie, and today I have Jeanne Lee with me here for a chat. Let's go.
My name is Jeanne Lee, and I'm a studio owner in Chicago, Illinois. And I found Pilates a little bit later in life. I'm 54, and I opened up the studio when I was 51. So I trained to become a Pilates instructor in my early 40s, shortly after I got divorced, and after I had like a serious health event. And so that kind of led me to Pilates. And so I've been teaching for over 10 years. And then along this journey, I decided to open up a Pilates studio. And so I'm in my third year now.
Amazing. So what's your story of opening a Pilates studio and also managing it?
So I spent a lot of years in the pharmaceutical industry, over 20 years in the pharmaceutical industry. If you name a pharmaceutical industry, I've probably worked for it at one point in my life.
Wow.
And I'm also am a pharmacist. So I went to pharmacy school, and then for years I was in the pharmaceutical industry. And basically my job at the time was doing like medical communications programs, helping patients, providers, and then also people that worked within the industry to understand the value of pharmaceuticals and why they were important and why they should use them and how they benefited your life. Sort of like better living through chemistry kind of thing. And I believe that, and I do still believe that there are pharmaceuticals that are really important that definitely make people's lives better. But I also don't think that it's sort of like the first line of defense that we should go towards. Like just because we experience like some pain, we shouldn't be reaching for a drug right away. Or we might feel sad, and the first thing that we want to do is, get on an antidepressant. And so for years, I actually did believe that. And so then I had my own journey through pharmaceuticals, and then I ended up having a lot of adverse effects associated with the medications that I was on. And then I ended up getting off everything that I was on. And it took me a long time for my body and my brain to kind of rebalance itself. And after I sort of started to rebalance myself and come out of what I referred to as a pharmaceutical fog, I started moving again. So I used to teach ice skating, and I skated a lot as a kid and also competed for a little bit as a freestyle figure skater. And so I started skating again. I started doing yoga again, and I started doing Pilates again. And I started to feel better in my body, and I started to sort of like recognize myself again. So, so I decided to become a Pilates instructor. And at first I wanted to learn more about Pilates because it made me feel so much better, right? Like I felt better ice skating, I felt better doing yoga, but I really felt tremendously better after I was doing Pilates. And it was a different type of movement that my body hadn't done in a really long time. We did versions of Pilates when I was young in skating, but we certainly never did anything on a reformer. It was more mat Pilates. So I thought, let me just learn about this movement so I could help myself. And in that process, I basically rehabbed my hip on my own because I have a torn labrum in my right hip, an anterior labral tear that I've had like since my late 20s. And anytime that I want to go see an orthopedic surgeon about it, of course, they always say do surgery. And I never wanted to do that. So during my training time as a Pilates instructor, I rehabbed my own hip. And I realized that there was a lot of magic to the movement, at least for myself. And because I experienced that with my own injuries, then somewhere along the line, and never did I think in a million years that I was going to become a Pilates instructor. I just thought, well, I'm going to learn this for my own benefit and then help myself. But because I helped myself so much, I decided to become an instructor so that I could help other people. And I really do love the movement, and I love helping people sort of like rehab their bodies. And so then that over time led me to open up a Pilates studio. So
you talked about this magic for movement.
uh-huh.
How do you translate it in your Pilates studio? Like, do you have a specific niche? For example, do you specialize in injuries?
Uh-huh.
How did you find that out at the beginning? Is it because of your personal experience?
Well, so I was, when you're a Pilates instructor and you're in the early stages of your career, my experience was I was working a lot and I was working at different studios a lot, right? So I was working at a gym, and then I was working at the ice skating rink where I was also teaching ice skating. And then I was teaching at like 2 or 3 different boutique studios. And then I kind of learned, because I was teaching so much and looking at all these different bodies, I realized that every body was really injured, right? Like they either had an injury through their athletics when they were young. Everybody was either injured because they were sitting behind a computer all day, and everybody was like head forward, shoulders forward with their back in pain. Everybody had tight hips because they were sitting all day and not a lot of glute strength. So even if you were like an able-bodied person, whatever that really means in the context of this world, everybody still was sort of like in pain. They like didn't feel good, or their shoulders hurt, or their neck hurts, or their back hurts. And so I kind of learned that everybody needed to kind of figure out how to reconnect into their body and how to use their body more efficiently. Like we're not really using our bodies very efficiently because we're kind of using our neck and shoulders all the time to move our arms, our back, and our hips to like move our legs. And so it was more than teaching people how to do Pilates. It was about teaching people to reorient their bodies so that they learned how to initiate every movement from their core. So it wasn't just strengthening your core. It was like teaching your body that your ab can help you move your arms. Your abs can help you move your legs. Your glutes should help you move your legs, right? And so that was very rewarding to me, having clients that came to me who were young, right? Like in their 20s and 30s, and saying, I have back pain, I have hip pain, I have this pain, I have that pain. And then over time, helping them alleviate that pain, not having them, like they didn't need their pain meds as much. Maybe they didn't need their antidepressants because they weren't in pain. They didn't need to go to the chiropractor as often or do physical therapy as often. Like they started to see benefits in their body, and they started to feel better, and then they started to just like feel good. And I'm a big believer that if you feel good, then you do more good in the world because you're not like pissed off all the time because you're in pain. So that was kind of like my road there. And it was just something that I kind of saw. And because I saw it, then my referrals naturally came through my other clients, and all the people that were referred to me were generally pretty injured. And so helping them rehab over time was like very beneficial to me, my own business and my teaching, but then also to my clients. So our studio actually is a specialized studio. That was part of the reason that I opened, because I wanted to create like a space where everybody felt comfortable, where everybody felt good coming regardless of the size of their body or regardless of the injuries that they have. So right now, all of the instructors that work at Restore Pilates are STAT instructors. Okay. And then we all have training in special populations and injuries. We have certifications in pelvic floor trauma or sports injuries, and we all come from a movement background to help people like learn about their bodies. So I used to be an ice skater. I have one of my instructors here used to be a competitive gymnast. I have another instructor that is a contemporary floor dancer. I have another one that does improv dance. So we all come from movement backgrounds to help people like teach them how to move their bodies properly. Because if you really think about it, we're never really taught how to properly learn our bodies, right? Yes. Like we like to think that movement is intuitive, that sleep is intuitive, right? Like we should all know how to move. We should all know how to run. We should all know how to sleep. We should all know how to eat. But really, we're never taught how to do those things. And it's a skill. And so I'm a big believer, and I tell this to all my clients, if you want to move better, you have to practice moving better. If you want to eat better, you have to practice eating better. If you want to sleep better, you have to practice sleeping better. Like you have to figure out what's important in your life, and then you actually have to practice those things because it's all a skill. And and our clients that come the most often, like we have clients that come anywhere from like 3 to 5 times a week. It's those clients that now don't go to their physical therapist anymore, that don't have back pain anymore, that yeah, so practice makes permanent.
Not perfect. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, no, nothing's ever perfect,
Yes,
right?
definitely.
Practice
Yeah.
just makes permanent. You get progress and you get better at it all the time.
It really sparks me from like how I used to have, sometimes I still have it. I have neck pain, but it's
Uh-huh.
like a new normal in this world,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
for people like sitting in front of the computer and you actually
Yep.
never
Yeah.
realize or are self-aware of it, but you should
Yes.
be, right?
Yes. Right. And even though the terminology that you use, like, right, like when you hear people moving a heavy couch, come on, put your back into it, right? Like
Yeah.
nobody ever says, put your abs and your glutes into it. People are like, come on, like use like put your back into it kind of thing. And it's just sort of, yeah. So even the terminology that we use, like we're so used to using the wrong parts of our body to move. And so it does require, and I remember too, like when I was a skater, that, and I've talked to my other clients who were competitive athletes when they were young. I mean, really, the message that we got was that if you can't do something, like if you can't land a jump, it's not that you weren't strong enough. You got the same message: practice harder or lose weight, especially for women, right? Like all my gymnasts, practice harder or lose weight. Nobody ever stopped to say, well, maybe your pelvis is really unstable and this is why you can't land that jump. So maybe during the week that you're PMSing or having your period, we shouldn't be jumping. We should be doing something else. We should be doing more stability work, or different types of work that are still strengthening. But when I fell on the ice, because I always had an unstable pelvis during certain periods of the month, I broke my tailbone 3 times. Right. And there's so many stories like that. And even from my instructor, who's a gymnast, same thing. Right. So now we know so much more about the body, and we know that we should train different ways in different periods of times, especially for women. But a lot of people don't get that message. Right. It's just sort of harder, practice more.
Yeah. So that's something that really this message needs to grow further and across
I
to
think
the
so,
public.
sure.
How about in terms of your studio business? Some studio owners, when they just started out, they would wonder if they need to be in a niche. Like, do you need to choose a niche, or does it just come to you?
For me, I did not have a particular niche, in the sense that it's not like I thought that we were going to focus on injuries in special populations, right? Like I opened the studio, I spent a lot of money on equipment, and then I just wanted people to come, right? I just like whoever comes through the door, I was willing to teach you Pilates. There was one thing that I did decide to do early on, and that was I was only going to do Pilates. And I know I've been to a lot of other studios where they do like a combination of Pilates and bar and yoga. And I knew very early that I really wanted to focus on Pilates. I was willing to entertain yoga because so many people do yoga, and there's a natural bridge between Pilates and yoga. But even after my first year, I took yoga off the schedule and I decided to just focus on Pilates. And it was because that's what I was good at. And that's what I wanted our studio to be good at. And then in the 3 years that we've been opened, what we have gotten is more and more people who have serious injuries. And like, for example, we have a client with MS that it took us like almost 6 months to just rotate her neck. We have a client with polio who has had 3 spinal surgeries. And in order for him to get his 4th spinal surgery, his spinal surgeon told him that he can't have the spinal surgery until he strengthens his abs, right? Like he needs more core strength in order to have this other surgery. We have clients that are significantly overweight that would, like in the obese category, where one of their questions were, what's the weight limit on your reformers? Because they exceed 400 pounds. So it's like over time, what has happened is that like, and I'm also a pelvic floor trauma specialist, and I used to teach Pilates, mat Pilates to the trans community. And so the trans community experiences a lot of pelvic floor trauma. So over the years, we've just ended up with a lot of clients who experience pain and discomfort and want to work out, but don't have a place to go.
Mm-hmm.
And so they can come here comfortably and still get workout.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. So that's kind of like eventually come into place, your niche.
Yes.
You didn't choose it on purpose, but it's also linked to your personal experience from the past. It's interesting.
And I also think that every studio is like a reflection of the studio owner, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the personality of the studio owner is just going to come through in the studio. And I've been to like lots of studios throughout the Chicago area and then other places that I've traveled. And you can kind of get a sense of what that niche is going to be based on who the owner is, if that makes sense. Like, so if you have an owner that has a really like extroverted personality, and you know, then chances are they'll have a lot more reformers because they're into more like larger group classes or whatever the case may be. Like our group classes cap out at 4. We have 4 reformers, and our group classes never have more than 4 people. And that for me was by design. Like I thought, I mean, part of it was also because that's all I could afford at the time. Like I could only afford 4 reformers. So I was limited, but I could have gotten 5. I could have gotten 5 reformers instead of a Cadillac, but I decided that I really wanted to just limit it to 4 because I felt like an instructor could do a good job of watching 4 bodies and cueing 4 people and providing each client, even in a group class, the specialized cueing that somebody might need. So.
But in terms of, I'm not sure if your goal would be to expand your business, or have you had any experience with expanding the business before? What would your insight be between the balance of expanding but also having to limit your group class into a group of 4?
So my rate limiting step to expand my business is finding good instructors. And that's it. If I could find more good instructors that I really liked, then I could have expanded. I could have opened up another location in the suburbs. Right now I'm on the north side of Chicago. And when I first opened, that originally was in my head. And I thought, okay, well, I'll get the Chicago location like set and secure. I'll hire a manager to manage this studio location. And then I will open up another location like in the suburbs, maybe like an hour away. That was always kind of like my plan in the back of my head. I can't find good instructors to even work here. So there's so much variation in the training in the Pilates industry. And there's also like so many different reformers now, right? Like there's stat reformers, peak Pilates, Basi reformers, balanced body. I can't even think of, or Gratz reformers. And so everybody trains on different reformers, and they're all basically the same, but there's also a lot of subtleties to them too. And people are comfortable in the training program that they go in. So if you're doing a balanced body training program, then of course you're going to want to work on a balanced body, you know, reformer, just because you're more comfortable in that equipment. But I just can't find good, well-trained, smart instructors.
How about nurturing from?
And that, yeah, all of that. I mean, first and foremost, I think the most important thing in any instructor is that they have to care about how somebody moves. That if you're just there to teach or to count to 8 for all of your clients, and while they're doing footwork and counting back and forth, or when they're doing mid-back series, that you're really there just to count. But if you're not watching somebody move and trying to help them move better, then it doesn't matter how well you're trained. By default, you're a bad instructor. I mean, you just are. Because the whole purpose of Pilates, in my opinion, is helping your clients move better. So that they reduce their risk of injury, so they hopefully heal from the injury that they have, get stronger, are more stable, more coordinated, more balanced, all of those things. And in order for that to happen, you have to care about how they move. And that is my biggest challenge.
Do you think a Pilates studio should nurture them in a way, for example, apprenticeship from someone who don't really know how to teach in terms of working experience, and nurture them in your studio to someone that you want them to be in your studio?
So I would be happy to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been asked to do that, to be like a teacher trainer program here at the studio. And there's a couple of problems with that. One is that it's really expensive, right? Like to run a program. I don't have time to do that. Like, I'm a studio owner. I have 3 instructors, so there's 4 of us. In order to keep the studio viable and just pay the bills, right? To pay the rent and the taxes and the utilities and, the Wix platform and all of that stuff, that the fixed operational monthly costs associated to run a studio, I have no option but to teach.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to teach in order to earn income for the studio to meet our expenses. Then there's the instructors and making sure that they have enough clients. So that in and of itself is a full-time job, right? Like, I teach anywhere from 30 to 45 hours a week. And then I spend another 20 to 30 hours a week running the business, right? Just doing all the stuff that it takes to run the business, manage the instructors and all that stuff. So for me personally, there is not time to run like a teacher trainer program. In order for me to do that, I would need more instructors to help me like support the business, and I can't find good instructors. So it's like a circle, right? Like, I need more instructors, but I don't have time to train instructors because I have to teach. So, and there are teacher trainer programs in Chicago. And then what happens is that, those instructors come out and they're young or they're new and they need time to like see bodies to help train, to figure out, just the way that I did, right? And because we're a specialized studio, and that it's hard for me to hire a brand new instructor.
Okay.
Who doesn't have a lot of experience. I'm willing to train that instructor, but that also requires time. And then they can't, early on when you're doing the apprenticeship and your internship, you're not making as much money as a senior instructor. And a lot of new Pilates instructors don't like to hear that. Like, they like to be like, well, I'm tested out. Like, I got my PMA certification or whatever my certification is. And so now I should be making X amount of money. And so I basically tell them, that's great, right? So then this is not the right place for you. Right? Like, you can get a job working at a club or like working at like a chain or something like that, where you will make X amount of money, and you'll go through a lot of bodies, but then this isn't the place for you, because we are a boutique specialized studio.
I think other studio owners might have the same struggle.
Oh yeah, it's hard. Because the other thing too is that not only do we want well-trained instructors that you just talked about, you want them to be nurturing and kind and understand how the body works, and you want them to have some anatomical knowledge and all of that stuff. So that's sort of the baseline. But because most studios are a small business, you're really looking at how many instructors that work at a studio. Like, most of the studios around here, there's anywhere from like 3 to 10 instructors, right? So it's like adding a new person to the family, and it can upset the balance. So not only does that instructor have to be well trained, but then that person has to be a good fit with the other instructors that are already at the studio. So, and then that's an added challenge. We're not like a big corporation where folding somebody into, the environment is not that big of a deal. Like, anytime I even interview somebody, it's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the other part of it too.
So that's where your line of balance is in terms of the studio business. Got it.
I won't hire. I mean, I really care about my instructors. I care about their mental health as well as their physical health and their financial health. I'm not going to just hire another instructor. If there was like if one instructor was like, no, I don't think this instructor is going to work out, then I wouldn't hire that person, because I wouldn't want to upset the balance that already exists.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so easy to do that.
So
And
the
I worked at studios like that,
mm-hmm,
and it's
got
not
it.
pleasant.
Oh, I remember because we talked earlier before, and you mentioned you have some insights on reformers and manufacturing, right?
Yeah, I just think that we're a small business, right? Like most studio owners are a small business.
Mm-hmm,
And so we're basically the president and the janitor and everything in between. So I'm the CFO to make sure that there's enough money in the account to manage the studio and to manage the instructors, right? I have to make decisions in terms of what happens here every day. I have to make sure that the studio is clean. So I still have to throw out the garbage and make sure that the floors are cleaned. When something goes wrong with our booking system, then I'm our IT person, right? I'm our HR manager when somebody needs days off and I have to figure everything out. So we're really doing a lot to manage a small business. And we're opening these studios and also spending a lot of money on the equipment, right? Like as soon as I spent $50,000 on equipment, as soon as I opened up the studio, the reformers, the Cadillac, the chairs, all the stuff. So it would be helpful that if there was a source to go to, that when we're having these challenges, we had a place to go. And because these manufacturers are big operational machines where we continue to give them money, and then also I give stat money for CE to continue that, it would be helpful if there was some sort of resource, whether it's, our primary organization that we bought where we bought the equipment from, or some other body to kind of help small studio owners continue to function.
mm-hmm. What do you think about the manufacturers right now? Do they provide enough support for you after providing the equipment?
I have to say no. It was of course these machines require some sort of maintenance, and you have to put them together, and there's natural wear and tear and that kind of stuff. So I would have to say that I ordered my equipment, I got it, and then there were little things that were wrong with it, like the springs on my chairs weren't even, or the shoulder blocks on my reformers wore way too quickly. And anytime I had an issue, I was directed to customer service, and I was basically just said, well, it sounds like you did something wrong, and so now you just have to buy a new one.
Mm-hmm.
And that was pretty frustrating.
That's not quite sustainable, right?
Not only is it not sustainable, it also doesn't reflect well on your sort of manufacturing services, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if you're going to present yourself as the leader in Pilates equipment,
Yep.
then my shoulder blocks shouldn't have worn 2 years later. Okay. Or my springs should be even, or like everything should be pretty well functioning. And then if something goes wrong, like I think that most manufacturers know that we're just kind of out here on our own running these small businesses. They don't make it easy. So,
Mm-hmm.
and that's also generally been the experience that I've heard from other studio owners, that regardless of what kind of reformers they have, right? Like when you spend X amount of money buying, let's say 6 to 8 reformers, you put them together, and then maybe something goes wrong with one of them and you want them repaired. And it's like, they don't even know who you are,
Mm-hmm.
which is a little frustrating.
So, okay, let's switch up the topic a little bit. Looking ahead, what is the biggest opportunities and challenges in your Pilates studio?
I think the biggest opportunity for me as in a studio owner is to try to get younger people into the studio,
Mm-hmm.
particularly teenagers, when a lot of them are competitive athletes at the high school or the college level, to teach them about their bodies, how to move more efficiently, let them know that it's sort of okay to have periods of time when their bodies might not be doing what they think that they should be doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you think you know, you have a week where everything's perfect, like you're landing your jumps or you're scoring your goals or you're running really fast. And the following week, everything's falling apart. And to teach young women and men, but it's just, you know, I have more relationships with women, to teach them about their bodies and then to help them understand that there's different kinds of training that they should or could be doing at different periods of the month or different times of the month. And we have a lot of teenage clients, and where most studios like tend to like not be really busy during the holidays, we end up extremely busy during the holidays because everybody's off. And so that's when all the teenagers come in, when all of my clients that are back home from college, they're back, right? Like during Christmas break and stuff, we are so busy. And
Mm-hmm.
seeing our teenagers and our young kids. And then during the summer, we tend to slow down naturally because, you know, people go away. Like we have a lot of clients with summer houses, and so they disappear for the summer. But then the ones that are here, they bring their kids in, right? Like I have a lot of moms that bring in their daughters. I have a lot of moms that bring in like their nieces or their sisters or whatever, or their cousins, because they feel so much better in their bodies and they've learned about their bodies that they want to teach their whomever, cousins, daughters, nieces, nephews, whatever. So that has been our biggest area of growth. And I would love to do like a formal program for like teenage girls or young adult women to help them learn about their bodies. So that's our biggest opportunity.
Why girls particularly? Is it usually?
Um, because I have three daughters. That's part of the reason, right? I have three daughters that range in age from right now 20 to 23. They're all young adults. And of course, none of them really do Pilates, but that's beside the point. But um, and but so I just understand women better, and just my own experiences from being a competitive athlete and then not being able to figure out what to do with my body. I understand that frustration. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that generally women tend to be harder on themselves and harder on their bodies.
Yeah.
And so that's a message that I want to try to work with women, that it's okay to have the body that you have, right? And I hear people all the time, like, how do you get a Pilates body? And I'm like, oh, it's really easy. You have a body, you do Pilates, and then you have a Pilates body.
Yeah.
End of story. Right? Like everybody wants like some sort of shape or something, and to let them know that every body is a good body and they all come in different shapes and sizes, and you just have to figure out how to use it the best that you can.
Yeah.
And we were labeled in the city of Chicago as a size-friendly Pilates studio.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I was really like pleased with that. So,
Amazing.
yeah.
As we have eventually come to about almost the end of the
Okay.
podcast, do you have any word of wisdom that you would like to share to other studio owners that are perhaps like struggling or wanting some insights?
Um, Figure out the one thing that you love to do in Pilates, and figure out the one thing that you're really, really good at within Pilates.
Mm-hmm.
And then just do more of that. Because if you're just out here, like teaching Pilates for the sake of teaching Pilates, because you thought that it was like a good business opportunity, or you thought it would be fun to open up a Pilates studio or something like that, it's in the end, because it's such an intimate movement. I mean, I think Pilates is a very, very intimate movement where you're really like you're watching people's pelvises all day long, right? Watching how they move and how and there's a lot of emotion attached to a lot of women and where they hold their trauma, and they tend to hold it in their pelvis, that you have to kind of figure out how you want to help your clients in that sort of in that how you want to help your client within Pilates, right? Like we're not therapists, we're not, you know, physical therapists, but how within Pilates are you going to help your client move better, and then just do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because
What
it
did
will
you?
make a lot easier.
What was that one thing for you?
For me, it was helping people how to breathe better
Mm-hmm.
and then move at the same time. To really try to incorporate their breath properly with movement. And that because I saw really early on how everybody held their breath, right? Like you would get somebody to try to do a roll up and they couldn't do it. And I'm like, well, you're just holding your breath, right? Like if you don't exhale on the way up, it's going to be pretty hard for you to get up. And it was like such an enlightening moment for most of my clients, like, oh, and actually, like I talk to a lot of my clients, and we have a lot of overweight clients or larger clients, and they can't roll up. And they'll say, well, I was never able to roll up, right? Because I was too fat. And I'm like, no, that has nothing to do with it. I go, if you consistently do Pilates and listen to what I say, you'll roll up in 6 months. And almost every single one of my clients are like, no, I won't. No, I won't. And I usually get them to roll up within 3 months. And I have one client who's still with me. She came to me like in her late 60s and now she's in her 70s. And she was always overweight. And she never thought that she could roll up because she was just too fat. And the first time that she rolled up, she cried because she did it, because she learned how to properly use her body, right? Like she wasn't anxious trying to get up. She wasn't like afraid that she couldn't do it. We created like a space for her to know that one day she could, and that she would build up into it, and that we would teach her about her body so that she could do it. And so that is actually a promise that I make to a majority of our clients, right? Assuming that they don't have, like our polio client obviously will not be able to roll up, but assuming that they're generally pretty able-bodied without, what's the word I'm looking for? And they're coming consistently, I make them the promise that they can roll up. And everybody does.
It's amazing. It's like, it's not only about the mindset anymore.
Right.
We're also learning how to use one part of our body to start like those little steps from the
Right.
beginning to
Yeah.
learn to do one single action at the end.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's amazing that I'm learning. Also, I was smiling a lot because you remind me of how I do yoga, how I always hold my breath.
Oh,
So that's why I was like, oh, that's me, that's me.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Most people hold their breath. Somewhere along the lines, we were taught, like, if something is really hard, that we hold our breath. Like, I see it all the time. Like, my kids do it. Clients do it, right? I'm like, don't hold your breath. Just exhale. Like, when something is hard, exhale. Like, exhale through the exertion. And they're like, oh, this is so much easier when I exhale. So,
yeah. Learning that too. Okay, so thank you so much for your time for coming to the podcast. Obviously we have an amazing conversation and I loved it so much.
oh,
Hope
good,
you
Kate.
enjoyed it too.
Oh, I did. Let me know how this progresses.
Yeah, definitely. I'll let you know
Okay.
once it's published, but I'm really looking forward to editing this one.
Okay.
It's so inspiring. I love it.
All right. Good morning, Katie. You have a good day. I'm about to
Yeah.
go home and go to bed.